Okay, we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order at 9:03 a.m. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Carr. Daniels.
Here.
Frost.
Here.
Gaylord.
Here.
Guerra.
Here.
Hanson. Harris.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Lampson. Lee.
Here.
Natoli. Peters. Cerna.
Here.
Terry. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. If everybody could please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Maybe I should have had Board Member Gaylord start. I love the Americana scarf there. All right. If the board clerk could please read the announcement.
This meeting of the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District is cablecast live without interruption on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast's Consolidated Communications and AT&T UVerse cable systems. This meeting is being closed captioned and will be webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will be repeated on Sunday, October 27th at 2 p.m. and Thursday, October 31st at 9 a.m. on Channel 14. Members of the audience wishing to address the board should fill out a speaker form located on the table at the back of the chambers and give it to the clerk. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. Also, at this time, please silence your cell phones until the conclusion of today's meeting.
Great, thank you very much. All right, good morning, board members. We've got a few quick items, and then I'd like to make sure we reserve the balance of the time for a couple of the discussion items here. So we'll go ahead and start with the consent calendar. Is there a motion on the consent calendar?
I'll move consent.
It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been seconded. Moved by Board Member Harris, seconded by Board Member Gaylord. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Measure passes. Okay. We will move on to the discussion calendar. And I think we have a brief one here on item 8.
Yes, item number 8 on the discussion calendar is the Board of Directors Composition Amendment Process by Kathy Pittard.
Is my mic on? Yeah. The board had asked for a report back on the process for changing the composition of the board, if you wanted to do that. The process is that you would appoint a city-county selection committee to select the actual members and to determine what the membership is. We did a look back on what the current distribution is in terms of population to the membership, and right now there's a slight disadvantage to the city of Sacramento. They represent about a little over 500,000 of the citizens of the county, and they have 4 members versus the other cities in the area represent about a little under 450,000. They have 5 members representing on the board. The discrepancy is a little bit more significant for the County Board of Supervisors. There's a provision in the statute that says that if the steering committee cannot agree on the composition of the board, then you default to the county gets 2/3 of the seats and the cities get 1/3 of the seats. So if you assume that that's sort of a representation of what the composition should be of the board, then the county's underrepresented fairly significantly. They have 5 seats out of the 14, which is far less than the 2/3 that they would be entitled to. But at the time we did the steering committee selection back in, I think, 94, that was the agreement that was made, and it was the only way to veer away from that would have been to limit the city membership on the board, bring the city members down so that the county represented more of a pro rata share. And the decision at that time was to do the distribution as we see it now. So from the staff's perspective, we don't recommend undergoing a new analysis, doing a new steering committee selection, unless the board wants to correct either of those two, perceived at least, imbalances.
Very good. All right, moving on to, if there are no other questions from the board, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda.
The next item, item number 9 on the discussion.
It's a receive and file. Yep. Yeah. Unless any, since the city of Sacramento is underrepresented, Board Member Harris, unless you're asking that the city of Sacramento get one more vote?
I'm happy to maintain the status.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you very much. We'll continue on to the next item. That was a receive and file. Madam Board Clerk.
Okay. Item number 9, 8-hour Ozone National Ambient Air Quality Standards Update. And I have David Yang here to give a presentation.
Good morning, Chair and members of the board. My name is David Yang. I am the Program Supervisor for the Planning and Data Analysis section in the Program Coordination Division. Today, I will be giving you an update on the Sacramento Regional 8-hour ozone classification and standards. As you know, ozone is formed by a chemical reaction between nitrogen oxides and a volatile organic compound in the presence of sunlight. Many studies have shown that ozone pollution adversely impacts human health, resulting in short-term and long-term effects. As such, EPA has established national ambient air quality standards to protect public health. For Sacramento County, we are part of the Sacramento Federal Non-Attainment Area. This also includes areas in Yolo County, Placer, El Dorado, Solano, and Sutter counties. These images shows where the NOx and VOC emission comes from, being that these two are the main components needed to form ozone. For the Sacramento region, the main sources that contribute to our ozone problem are from mobile sources. This chart shows the progress that we have seen throughout the years in reducing ozone in the region. The orange line is what the reduction that we've seen since 1990. The green, yellow, and blue line are the 3 federal standards set by EPA. This graph does not include the days that were impacted by wildfires in 2008. We are currently working with EPA to see if we could exclude those days, being that to see if we could exclude it from regulatory decision, because it is important that those days be excluded to meet the 1997 ozone standard. This table shows the attainment date for the three standards. For the 1997 standard, the 2008 standard, we are designated as severe non-attainment. For the 2015 ozone standard, we had an option of being designated either moderate or severe. Moderate was based on the modeling that was done at the time of the designation request, or severe, which was to be consistent with the 2008 standard. We decided to go with moderate because it was easier to bump up to serious, where we want to be, rather than being bumped down from severe classification. Being designated as moderate non-attainment, our attainment date for the 2008 standard is a year before the attainment date for the 2008 standard. As such, we will be requesting to being reclassified from moderate to serious. The reclassification request is allowed under the Clean Air Act. This will extend our deadline to August 2027. The new deadline will be after the attainment deadline for the 2008 standard. The next step is that the other districts will be providing a similar briefing to their boards. After that, we'll be sending a joint letter to CARB requesting for this reclassification. CARB will submit the reclassification to EPA, and EPA will take action on that. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to take any answers. Also, if there's any questions regarding the recent EPA letter from headquarters, Dr. Ayala and Mark are also prepared to answer a question on that issue.
Great, thank you for your presentation. I have Board Member Natoli here to speak.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. My question is, relates to, I understand you're going to get more time with the redesignation, but what other, if any, implications are there to go from moderate to serious? If we could fit in the moderate category, obviously there, you know, that says something different to the general public than serious. And but if we are serious as it relates to the standards, then I guess that's okay. But just to buy time to say that we're worse than we are or not, I guess I'm trying to understand that, because your charts outline it, and so maybe Alberto or you could explain that. So.
Yes. So one of the reasons why I want to go to serious is because the attainment date for the moderate classification is a year before the 2008.
No,
standard.
I get that. That's very clear. But I want to know what the implications are of going from moderate to serious. To say that we're serious in our condition, what implications does that have? Any other implications to it relative to severity by which we're judged? That's what I'm trying to get to. So.
Right. So Director Natoli, Mark Lautzenheiser, Division Manager of Program Coordination Division. The short answer is we actually do need the additional time. The moderate is actually very generous in terms of the modeling, especially with the more stringent standard. We do not think we would make it by that earlier deadline. From a requirement standpoint, because we are already severe for both the 97 and the 08 standard, we actually will not be seeing any additional requirements on our businesses or our residents by doing this. All it really does do is make sure that we have the appropriate amount of time to actually attain. When those deadlines are up there, we actually have to show 3 years of attainment by that deadline. So even when we say that under the current standard, it's 2024 at moderate, it means we actually need to meet the standard starting in 2021. So we actually do need those additional 3 years, because it goes from 2024 to 2027 in order to meet the standard.
And I guess to this reader, then that wouldn't be apparent that it means that by a year and a half out we'd have to meet the standard. So it's really not 2024; it's 2021. So why is it done that way?
EPA, when they're going through, they want to make sure that an area has not only made attainment by the year, but that they have 3 years of history showing that it wasn't just a blip on the timeline.
Okay, yeah, again, that's not apparent, obviously, from the chart. Your explanation helps me understand that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Natoli. Board Member Daniels.
Go back to slide 4, I believe it was. Yeah, that one right there.
Okay.
So over the years, the goal has changed, and over the years, obviously, by looking at the chart, the pollution level has changed dramatically. It looks like, and at some point, it makes me wonder if having to. If I look at today and I compare it to 20 years ago or whatever, we're doing very well, and it makes me wonder: do we just keep changing the levels, and in the process, it makes us look like a failure? If we've changed and we've done so well, and now we're going to go to serious, how does that make even any sense? And so maybe I'm just on my bandwagon and making a statement and saying at some point maybe the process has to look at, is this a realistic attainment level as opposed to just a wish, a hope that we can get something down to so low? Because things today are so much better than they were before, and to say we have a serious problem, it concerns me, and it just doesn't make sense at some point.
Let me take that one. So just to be clear, the standards that we're trying to meet, the goalposts, these are the federal standards. And the green, the yellow, and the blue line are predicated on the latest science. What the latest health science is suggesting is that we need to get to ever increasing more stringent standard, meaning lower ambient pollution levels. So it's a race against time. You're right, we've made a lot of progress, but the latest standard that we are presenting to you today, the 2015 National Ambient Air Quality Standard for ozone, is the blue line. So that's the latest and greatest goalpost. What we're doing today is simply aligning through an administrative action so that legally we have to meet all of them. You can't just, because we have a 2015 standard, forget the past. We have to show that we attain each one of the standards. But to your point, I don't disagree with you. We've made a lot of progress, and we will continue to make progress. I think what I want to make sure that is clear to the board, these are national ambient air quality standards set by the federal government. They go through a very rigorous process every 5 years to review each one of these standards. They consider, among other things, the latest health science that tells us how much pollution a human being can actually withstand. And I'll end with this point, which is probably not what you want to hear, but, for example, the latest science that we're learning from not ozone pollution, but particle pollution, is really pointing that there is really no safe level for human exposure, which really is only going to translate to much more difficult tasks for all regions across the nation, not just us, in terms of being able to continue to drive down pollution.
And I don't think we would disagree, anybody would disagree that we would want pure air if we could have it. But at some point, do we reach a unrealistic goal? And not to raise controversy at this point, but there are some of us that feel that the federal government that was in place in 2015, we don't agree with the levels or goals that they might have had and on a realistic level. And so we'll have to see what happens in 5 years, which would be 2020, and see if that changes also. And then I did want to ask you to address the issue of the recent letter from the EPA and whether this would have any issue. So,
very good questions. Let me just remind you, and this is going to touch on the next discussion item, and that is, we can debate the philosophy of meeting standards for public health protection, but I want you to be aware that there are consequences to the region if we don't meet the standards. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next presentation in terms of what happens if we don't attain. That's one aspect. And again, we're just following the legal mandate that we have as a region, and we're not alone in this challenge. I mean, you know that California has got the most polluted air in the nation. We've also made the most progress. So what we're doing today is simply bringing you an administrative action. We will have over the next few years the opportunity to continue this conversation because we have to develop a SIP, a state implementation plan, that will show how we're going to get to the blue line. And then to your second point, you're correct. The 2015 standard was promulgated by the previous administration. However, the current administration is got complete latitude to either reject or accept this standard, and they have accepted it. So the current EPA is the one that is pushing us and the rest of the nation to develop air quality plans for 2015.
And then the final thing I want to say is that our external factors that we have no control over, that we always talk about, the fires and stuff like that, do those come into play as we try to meet that level? And, so like we had a level and maybe an asterisk next to it that said, yeah, but we had 10 fires and stuff like that out of our control.
They certainly come into play, and Mr. Yang addressed that briefly. There is a process by which we can work with EPA, federal EPA, to make sure that we exclude those exceptional events so that they are not counted against us. I mean, that's really the simplest way to put it. But like I said, we'll bring you back more information. There's going to be plenty of time for us to engage in some of the nuances that go into putting the air quality plan together for this standard.
Thank you, Dr. Ayala. This is a receive and file, and I think to underscore some of the questions here, it's a national requirement that we have to meet. This is an administrative update to show that, one, we need more time, but the impacts are not going to be to the residents and the businesses because we've already exceeded those limits of where the impacts are. But this is an effort to keep the board informed about what the Air District is doing under the mandate requirements. Board Member Harris.
There we go. Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to point out the contradictory nature of the current administration in that they would uphold the 2015 standards for ozone and at the same time revoke our waiver to set more stringent emission standards on our California vehicles. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't think anybody could actually make sense of it, but those are the conditions that we're presented with. And actually, it ties right into our next discussion about budget and per capita fee. Just a statement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Board Member Harris. This is, again, a receive and file. If there are no more questions, I thank you for your presentation. Appreciate that. And we'll go on to the next item. Let's see. We do have a member of the public signed up to speak, but I think what we'll do is I'd like to get the staff presentation first. We'll go to the members of the public, and then we'll bring it back to the board unless there's a disagreement with that. Okay, Madam Clerk.
Item number 10, the proposed new per capita fee update, presentation given by Alberto Ayala.
Before I jump into the presentation, I wonder if I can revisit the last point and have our district council give the board an update. It's related to Director Harris's question about some of the legal proceedings that we're under.
Well, just to let the board know, I mean, we had an inquiry at the last meeting as to what we were going to do in response to the letter, and then also the California's lawsuit on the emissions waiver, and we're still looking at that. CAPCOA attorneys are going to be meeting next week to discuss the various avenues, so we'll have a fuller report back on that in January.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next item, and again, thank you, Board, for entertaining this discussion. I'm going to jump to the last bullet here, just to kind of put in perspective. We were asked, you may recall last board meeting, we shared with you that subsequent to the board meeting, we were having a meeting with the Budget and Personnel Committee of your board. And it was that committee that gave us direction to bring back this item. So I just want to put that out there to make sure that it's clear that we're simply trying to follow direction here. But one of the first things that we want to share with you is perhaps elucidate some of the history related to this conversation, which is by no means a new conversation. You may recall that as far back as the fall of 2018, as part of the budget process, we had discussed with the board and the budget committee the idea of the per capita fee, what it is, what it meant, and it was that committee and this board that gave us direction to look into it. We did discuss the meeting at the beginning of this year, because again, it became one of the key strategies that some of the board members pointed to in terms of being under your control. Subsequent to that, we've included the item as part of every budget discussion that we've had. These occurred typically in April and May as part of the annual budget process. And again, following your direction, one of the things that we did very diligently, and frankly, I think is one of the best things that we've done in terms of being able to establish relationships with the jurisdictions. We actually met with each one of our 8 jurisdictions, and I'm talking about not just you as our board representative, but city managers, county execs, budget managers, finance people, that sort of thing. The last update at the last meeting was simply that. We were asked by the board to bring back the latest in terms of where we were on the per capita fee. And like I said, it was the budget subcommittee that asked us to bring back. Really what it was is essentially some answers, some perspectives. There was a number of comments that you made in September, and we did not respond to those comments, so we want to bring back to you some perspective on that. The first of the comments was in reference to cutting our budget, and what I want to make sure that you understand is that we have tightened our belt quite a bit, to the tune of almost $4 million in the fiscal year that you see on the slide. And again, this is essentially related to the staffing, which is one of our largest costs in our budget. We've talked to you about hitting pause in terms of buying us some time to examine our financial situation and come up with a plan. We are operating well under the approved positions that this board has adopted, and just to give you an example, for 18-19, we're operating at 87 relative to 98 approved FTEs. And I don't have the current numbers for you because we haven't closed those books yet, but we will have those, of course. And then beyond staffing costs, which again account for the lion's share of this cost reductions, we've also what I call right-size every contractual commitment that we have with our partners in terms of looking at, doing absolutely the minimum that we need to still maintain our mission. And again, why do we know this? Because we've shared with you information when we compare budget to actuals that clearly show that we've tightened our belt significantly. And beyond that, we're doing some things that, we're hoping that things go our way, and we're just putting off some things that, frankly, any public entity should not be doing. But again, this is a reality that we're under. We're not replacing some of our aging infrastructure. Again, if an ozone analyzer goes down and we stop collecting data, that's on us, and there's going to be implications not only for us but for others that depend on that data. Not to say that the public really demands pollution information. There was a comment that was made about travel. And we can certainly appreciate the concern, but we've also tightened our belt when it comes to travel. We really are only doing the minimum. There are some things that we need to do to interact with our peers like Capcoa and some of the other districts, but we are really being judicious about where we go, how many people we send, for how long we go. And then the last point I'll make, because I'm probably one of the staff in this agency that travels the most, my MO is really, if I get an invitation or a request to go to a meeting, if it doesn't come with travel support, I just simply say no. So I think it's worth you noting that. The second point that was discussed at this board meeting last September was, what happens if we don't become a well-sourced, well-functioning, stable agency that can carry its mission. The first thing I'll say, and we've said this many times, so today we'll have our friends from SACOG address this point more clearly from their perspective. You may recall last month, Mr. Corliss was here to point to some of the implications of not having an air quality plan done by this agency. But again, the biggest thing is the federal transportation funding. Back to the previous discussion, if we don't have an air quality plan that EPA can approve, we risk federal transportation funding. So from that perspective, the nastygram that Administrator Wheeler sent Mary Nichols is true. There is a very strong correlation between federal funding for transportation and an approved SIP. The other thing that is at risk is simply just compliance with some of the programs and rules that this board has adopted in the past. Many of those rules have been adopted, and frankly, they haven't been identified in terms of the revenue streams that are supposed to fund them. And probably the best known is check before you burn. It's a critical measure. We absolutely need it for attainment, but we don't have a standing funding source for it. We will not be able to respond to public complaints and calls that we get for a number of issues. So our delivery of services to the public is certainly at risk. One of the most critical areas that we carry as a function of this agency is our land use review and CEQA roles. And again, there is no identified state or other source of funding for those responsibility, which I know that you appreciate because you're all involved in general plans and climate action plans and that sort of thing. And then the last point is the thing that we keep talking to you about, which is really one of the best opportunities that the region has, not only to advance in terms of air quality, but also some of the funding from the state level that we can attract to the region, and that is AB 617, the community air protection. Another point that we keep hearing often is, and it's a fair question, jurisdictions and many folks that we have met with that perhaps are not as familiar with the district as you, they say, what do we get from the district? And frankly, notwithstanding the obvious, which is putting us on a path for clean air, frankly, the numbers speak for themselves. Without paying anything, if I can be so candid, this agency, and you get the credit, you have enabled the programs that have brought millions, literally millions, to the region in terms of investments for cleaner technology. Now, what is that cleaner technology? I asked staff to include some examples here. Charging infrastructure, electric trucks for private and municipal fleets, zero-emission school buses. We're making a big play in that area simply because the obvious need and the benefit. We're working with some of your jurisdictions to start to deploy refuse collection that is totally zero emissions. So again, these are monies that come in the form of state incentives that are benefiting, I have to believe, that are benefiting the region. And again, we have done this without tapping into the jurisdictions to help us with our financial challenges. So I want to make sure that we make that clear. Why do we have a budget gap? Again, this is nothing new. We've known that this is an issue. We simply have chosen to actually do something about it and not kick the can down the road anymore. We just have too many programs that don't come with full cost recovery. And many of those programs are great, are the incentive programs that we're tapping into the state cap and trade dollars and some other programs. But by design, the state doesn't give air districts the full administrative recovery ability in terms of covering the administration of those programs. And you know full well, to put money into work, it requires resources. Federal government is the same thing. They impose requirements on us in terms of doing some things in terms of ambient air monitoring and the planning. They do give us some funding, but it's not covering all the costs. And I talked about some of the programs that this board has approved. And one of the things that is really catching up on us is none of the funding sources that we currently have are indexed to inflation. So it's just a ticking bomb. To continue on this argument, we're obviously seeing, as you have seen in your jurisdictions, employee costs. And I'm not talking about, this board hasn't given our employees any new benefits. This is just simply the cost of living increases, pension, health, et cetera. We need to address, we have some safety issues with not only our offices, our building, but I mean, just being out out there monitoring for air quality and other things. There are some things that we need to do to make sure that our employees are safe performing their functions, and that requires funding. We need to upgrade technology, just to come up to the 21st century. And again, we're doing as much as we can, meeting the rising demands with fewer resources. And here's just one example of how you can see the trend in terms of increasing the public reaching out to us, saying, we need you out here watching out for air pollution. And you can see the complaints, the trend chart that we included there. I'll take the credit or the blame for this poor graphic, but I'm trying to illustrate for you that to close this gap between revenues and expenditures, we're not relying on any single measure. I know that the focus has been per capita, but again, that's just one of the 6 different things that we identified for this board that we needed to work on. The reality is the other 5 things, there are many factors outside of our control that will determine our future. Per capita is under your control, and that's simply the reason we decided to proceed with this item, again, because you gave us direction. You told us to look at per capita initially. And another question we got is, what is the gap? Well, it's about a 6 million gap. Where does the number come from? This table is something that you've seen in the budget process. And we presented for you the funding plan, which includes these 6 strategies. We gave you a low and a high scenario. And the $6 million is simply the middle scenario for sake of simplicity in the discussion. So getting to the end, so what we are presenting for you is not, we're not setting a precedent. We're not doing anything out of the ordinary. You can see here that many air districts have a per capita fee in place. It's a principal mechanism for funding the programs with local dollars that other sources don't provide. And you can see here the level of funding in terms of the per capita that is generated in various districts. Beyond per capita, some districts, probably the most notable is the Bay Area, they have relied on a property tax to fund some of their functions. And even though we don't show here, those of you that serve on SACOG board, you know that SACOG, for example, the MPOs, they do have a per capita or what we call a membership fee for them to be able to operate. So again, I don't think what we're bringing you is anything out of the norm. So now let me wrap it up, because this is really getting to the end. One of the things that you wanted us is to bring you alternatives. What are the options? Well, you can take no action. You can just simply postpone the action. You can abandon it. Again, if I can be very candid, kicking the can down the road is an alternative. Another thing that I heard from many jurisdictions is the fact that $1.50 was too steep, and we justified the number, but it's under your complete control and latitude to adopt a different fee. So, some of the other districts have gone with 50 cents. So if that is something you want to do, you have the authority and control to do that. If you want to do it over a time period, again, you can tell us that as well. It can be over 2 or 3 years. One of the other options that we heard from the board was to simply wait for other things, like Measure A. We could certainly do that. Or if you have any other suggestions today, I guess that's why we are here, so that you can deliberate on the direction that I hope that you do give us in terms of how to proceed with this proposal. So with that, I'll conclude.
Great, thank you very much. I've got board members signed up to speak, but we're going to take the comments from the public on this item first, and then we'll go, there's only one person, is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes,
and-
I have Casey Lazon with SACOG.
Good morning, Chair Guerra, members of the board. I'm Casey Lazon, Deputy Executive Director for the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. We are the metropolitan planning organization designated under federal law to do transportation planning and programming for the 6-county region. And I'm here to speak of the role that the Air District plays in transportation planning and programming. There are actually themes of that role in the intersection of air quality and transportation in this item and the prior item. As the MPO for the region, we plan and we program transportation funds, about $1.5 billion a year. Our ability to do that so that transportation agencies can deliver those projects, both road and transit projects, to plan, construct them, open them to traffic, is dependent on a valid state implementation plan. So we look to the Air District to be able to do timely updates to that state implementation plan, so that through that, we, representing the transportation sector, can understand what it is that our transportation projects need to do in total in order to conform to the Clean Air Act. So we rely on that timely update of that state implementation plan, coordinate very closely with them on that. There is, as you know, under the SAFE rule, there will be effects of that new rule coming down the pipe with regard to transportation, and the SACOG's role in planning and programming funds. We will see the impact of that potentially on our metropolitan transportation plan, and that's a briefing that you got from my executive director at a prior board meeting. Down the line, there's the potential that the state implementation plan will need to be updated to deal with the SAFE rule, and that is, again, something where we rely on the Air District to be able to timely update that so that we can keep transportation planning, programming, and ultimately opening to construction happening. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you, board members. This is a item to provide direction to staff. Since we don't have an agendized actual fee or item on the agenda, we're not voting on anything specifically here. But in order to avoid having our staff spin their wheels, no pun intended for transportation folks, we want to make sure that they have clear direction from the board on what to pursue to address this budget gap here. And with that, I'll go ahead and start. I have Board Member Harris, Cerna, Terry, and Carr punched up. And before Carr, I have actually Sue Frost, who doesn't. For remembering. Yes. Before that, whose button doesn't have a button here. So Board Member Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Ayala, at our last budget meeting, we discussed this item pretty thoroughly. I recall suggesting to you that you go back to county execs and city managers, and given the discussion that we had at this dais last meeting, in which $1.50 seemed to be out of reach for most jurisdictions, to ask them what could be afforded, in each jurisdiction. I don't really see that feedback in this presentation. You suggest that maybe 50 cents might be palatable for a lot of people. I think it quite probably could be. We talked about a slow implementation of fees, over a period of 2 or 3 years. I think that these are things that we really need to flesh out. My own feeling is that every jurisdiction can provide some funding to AQMD and should. As you said, we're kind of in a contradictory position here because we approve programs, as you've stated, that really have no solid funding source. So we're kind of ahead of our skis in terms of the direction that we give to you, and I think that we need to step up and provide more funding to the district. I guess the feedback or direction I'd like to give you is exactly what I just said. Go back to the execs and managers and say, what could you realistically pull out of your budget? It seems to me that 50 cents is certainly attainable for most, and the fact of the matter is, we all pollute the air and we all breathe the air, and we got to share the burden. So I would give that direction. Figure out where we can get. It might be 50 cents, it might be 75 cents. But when you come back to this board, have some solid suggestions from the administrations of the jurisdictions, just feedback on, what possibly could be contributed. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Harris. Board Member Cerna.
Thank you. So first of all, let me say that I appreciate your presentation. I think as our local air pollution control officer and the head of this organization, you're obligated to give the presentation that you did and give this board full information before giving you direction in this case. That combined with, I think, the very, very clear message that you and your staff and the public heard from board members last time about not disagreeing with the legislative intent, not disagreeing with the mission of the district, in fact, agreeing wholeheartedly with what you're trying to do. What the issue here is where we are expected to find the funding, right? And just like you're obligated and expected to kind of give the presentation that you just gave, I think, speaking for the Board of Supervisors members up here, all 5 of us could probably give you a day-long presentation about cuts and the trials and tribulations of balancing our budget and having to make some very difficult decisions and set priorities when it comes to funding extremely important programs. Not to say our programs are more important than others, but we're charged with things like public health, child welfare, things that are probably arguably the most intimate aspects of local governance and service delivery. And so for me, the issue remains not being opposed, but in fact being very supportive of what you're trying to do. I just don't know, and to Board Member Harris's direction, have at it. Go back to CEOs or the county CEO and city managers. I can probably give you a preview of coming attractions for that conversation when it comes to the county. It's going to be a big goose egg. And I'm just being very honest here. We spent 5.5 hours on Tuesday on one issue in these chambers at our board hearing on whether or not to accept a sizable state grant to make some capital facility improvements at a county facility. We had a robust discussion about the operational costs involved with that, the fact that there's some need there because it's an antiquated capital facility that needs attention. But almost everything that we're doing, and I cite that, we're having to look through the lens of our own fiscal condition at the county. And without belaboring why we are in the condition we are, we're already looking at ourselves staring down the fact that the next 5 or 6 years are going to be extraordinarily tough, to the point where I would expect the CEO is probably going to come with his recommended budget to us each May, with prospective cuts possibly to balance our own budget. So to come, especially at the County of Sacramento, and say we need close to $1 million for this, it's not the pushback you're hearing from me, perhaps others that are members of the Board of Supervisors up here. It's not that we disagree with what you'd put the funds towards. It's the fact we just don't have it. So I don't know how you're going to get blood out of that stone. And I don't want to be defeatist here and leave you with a sense that we can't do this. You just have to understand that I don't know what you would ask us to cut in order to fund this. I don't know where I would go to do that. And I think other board members might have a similar sentiment. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Stern. Board Member Terry.
So, as I think the youngest city up here, I do understand, and I don't question anybody from any other jurisdiction, what your budget scenarios are. I get that we don't have a lot of the overhangs that a lot of the older governments do in this region. But what I would suggest to you, aside from going and talking to your county administrator or your city manager or your CFO or your finance director, go talk to your public works director. Can you pull up slide 6, the one with the map? That one. What I would caution everybody here about doing is being a penny wise and a pound foolish. So these are investments over the next 5 years that you're estimating. And I just want to understand, the green is what the air district is going to be attracting into the region for these.
Thank you for calling that out. So yes, the map that you've seen before, the legend in the white numbers is what has already been brought to the region without any jurisdiction, frankly, putting anything on the table. So this is already what this agency gets credit for.
Has done in the last.
It's been done over the last couple of decades.
Okay.
The green is really the potential. That means because we want to get more active. And frankly, I mean, mobile sources is where the emissions are. So, I mean, this is not just about the money. This is about how are we going to get to attainment. But the green is really the potential, the things that if we are well sourced, we can do for the region. And if we're not, then we're just going to have to pass on those, similar to the county. We're just going to have to pass on the state incentives, and they will go somewhere else.
So thank you for that. And so in my city, again, if we're taking $1, let's say, which would be about $74,000 a year, if we don't do that, I'm at risk of losing $3.7 million. For a cost of considerably less than $500,000. So again, I don't want to question, trust me, I was on the Sac City School Board. Patrick, I know, just stepped away, but I've sat in the shoes of having to cut $50 million a year out of a $400 million budget. Like, I get the difficulties that everybody are going to have. But if you look at this and we say, for the county, $1 million, and you're risking $29 million of funding. So less than $5 million of investment for a $29 million investment back into roads, infrastructure, transit. So what I would question, because I think the unique thing for me is my city manager was my public works director, so he does understand this. But go back and talk to your public works director and ask them what's at risk if we don't have attainment, if we don't have an approved SIP plan, because ultimately, if you're talking about this, I mean, Elk Grove, you can see the number. You can see the number in the city of Sacramento. You can see it in Folsom. What is the number that we're talking about, and what is potentially on the table here? So again, penny wise and a pound foolish. I mean, in the end, yes, you would have to identify some sort of cost, but also, what projects were you planning on? I know in my city, White Rock Road and a Tiger Grant would be at risk, and that's about $10 million over the next, I think, 7 years for us. In growing cities like Elk Grove and other ones, what are the potential projects that you were expecting the Air District to be able to deliver for you? And again, I don't know if this takes into account exactly the dollar amount that SACOG would be losing, but again, if we don't have these approved plans, what are you ultimately losing? So again, I don't think there's any specific direction to take today in working with staff, but I think, going back and not just talking to your finance manager and figuring out how big of a check does the Air District cut to your city. I know when I was on the Cable Commission, I got a copy of that check every year, and and if you ask my finance director, they'll say, well, this is how much money might have come in from the Air District. But how much money is at risk of major projects in your own communities by not having a functioning Air District? And then the only other thing that was brought up in the last meeting that I also want to remind folks of, I want Dr. Ayala to at least confirm that I'm right about this, there are no discretionary programs at the Air District. There are a whole bunch of programs we're expected to do that we don't get funded for, but there are no discretionary programs, correct?
That is correct. I mean, we mentioned to the Budget Committee, we pull back and cut to the bone. So if we axe a program, then we're going to need to bring back to you a very clear explanation of the implications of that.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Vice Chair Frost.
So I appreciate Director Harris's comments regarding our Budget Committee and some of the discussions that went on there. And I'm remembering back because one of the things that we talked about and that you shared with us was that there are very real consequences. There will be monetary consequences, funding that we're going to lose if we don't meet certain criteria or goals. And one of the things that we suggested was going back to each of the jurisdictions and quantifying what that means. And in particular, in relation to transportation dollars and SACOG, because SACOG is, we have our MTP SCS, we've never met the goals that were laid out in that document yet. And it's difficult meeting the goals that we have for this air district. So if you were to find a way to quantify what actual dollars can be at risk for our jurisdiction at the county, then you can give us some actual numbers that we can then rationalize in our decision making. But right now, to me, everything is up in the air. It's like if we don't do this, we are at risk for losing that. That doesn't really tell me anything. What that tells me is something might happen if we don't do this. And I think to Supervisor Cerna's point, we have very real consequences right now and decisions that are quantifiable. I mean, actual dollars that it's down to. We are having hard decisions about not being able to receive money because we can't afford to receive it. That's pretty bad. That's pretty hard. And so it's not just what can the jurisdictions do. We need to be able to clearly see what is at risk in our transportation dollars and in other dollars that come to the air district. If we don't meet our air district goals, is funding at risk? Is the state just going to give us this unfunded mandate and then let us flounder and die? I mean, at what point does the state then begin to say, okay, they need help. They're a branch of us. They're working under our policy, but they're not able to meet our goals based on the funding that we're providing. And maybe there's something that can give at that level, because we're getting to the point where there's no give at the local level.
So thank you, Vice.
I think what I'm trying to say is you were going to go back to the jurisdictions and meet again, but in the next meeting you were going to tell them what the actual numbers are, what funding is at risk. Someone mentioned $100 million, hundreds of millions of dollars could be at risk. We need to know what is at risk so that we can then rationalize from
So,
there.
Vice Chair Frost, we'd be happy to go back and work with our friends at SACOG to bring you that number. But just initial perspective, just for clarity, back to Director Terry's point, the numbers, the dollars in green are the programs that we as an air district have direct access to, that if we can, we will bring to the region.
I think that's great.
Ms. Lasan already talked about that the federal funding dollars that SACOG has access to for the region is on the order of $1.5 billion. So, and as an initial reaction, you more or less add a zero to the green numbers, and that is the money that you're talking about is at risk from the SACOG perspective. So we're talking, you know, if you think this is a lot of money, SACOG is really where, and you see this, right? I mean, this is how we build bridges and expand roads and what have you. But we'd be happy to come back and give you more specifically as a region.
And I just want to say, I appreciate that money is coming to the region, but a lot of the funding that we get at the county is competitive. So we're out there trying to get our share of what's coming to the region, and we have real live issues like, you know, more linear roads and challenges in the suburbs where we don't quite have that really exciting program that might be just perfect for what the money wants to do in a more dense population. And so while we're trying to compete for funds, you know, what we need to know is what that does for the unincorporated county, really. I mean, that's what we need to know. That's what we're after. We want to know how that's going to impact. We like the region, we're happy about the region, but we have real live problems that we can't walk away from. We have lawsuits that we have to fulfill, you know, years of goals, and we can't, we don't have choices, and we will be cutting because of those. So it's nice, this is great, but something can give here. There's other areas in the county where nothing can get, where there is no give. I think Supervisor Cernas said it really well.
Okay. And maybe just one last point to clarify, to your very specific example of competing. For you to have the funding to be able to compete for these projects, there is a clause that calls for an air quality plan to be approved by the EPA, the federal government, for SACOG to be able to access those funds. So, I mean, this is really even prior to the entry point where you can actually have a competition. So, again, I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah. Thank you. I have Board Member Carr, Natoli, Peters, and Gaylord. Board Member Carr.
Well, thank you for the presentation. It's very compelling. Obviously, we are in a situation that's not sustainable. And I appreciate everything that you and the staff have done already to reduce cost. But it's obvious we can't keep taking oats out of the feed bag and expect the mule to live. So we're going to have to take some action on this. Some people on the Budget Committee have more information on this than I do. But if you could go to slide number 10 rather, and help me understand the next one. Help me understand a few things. I understand about Measure A and what that is going to entail. And most of the discussion here has been on the per capita proposal. But let's look at some of the other areas that we may be able to get more revenue. The stationary and other, could you explain what that's all about? And there's a potential for up to $300,000. What is that?
Good morning, Amy Roberts with the Stationary Source Division. Stationary source fees, we do have a rule in order to collect permit fees from those that we do regulate. And what we want to do is make sure that we're operating a cost-effective program and cost recovery. And so this would be an effort to look at that rule, look at the funds that we are collecting through the stationary source permit fee, renewal fees every year, and make sure again that if there is a gap.
Is this something the district can do independently, or what has to happen in order to do that?
That can be done by the district at your board approval.
So this is an action, it's simply a recovery of what it costs to perform the services?
That is correct.
Okay. And the line below that has a potential for another $700,000 on the high side anyway. Full cost recovery, Rule 301 and 304. What are we talking about?
So 301 is actually what I was just speaking of, and that is the permit fees, the full cost recovery for Rule 301. If you're speaking about the area-wide and indirect source fees and that row item, that's another area where we do have health and safety code does allow us to collect fees for certain areas where there is air pollution that we currently do not collect any fees for.
So for these full cost recovery increases, this is a board-approved process, or do you?
Yes,
so
it
you
is.
just need to bring that to us for us to approve?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. On the next one down, the mobile new DMV surcharge, how does that work?
This is one of the major categories of funding for the air district, and again, many air districts rely on this. And basically, this is a surcharge on vehicle registrations. And one of the things that we want to do as part of our funding plan, again, is work with the other air districts, because obviously this is not going to be a unique measure by us. This is a state measure. And we want to see if we can increase that surcharge on vehicle registrations.
This is something the legislature would have to do.
Well, 34 other air districts are going to have a lot to say about this. The legislature, many people are going to weigh in on this. And again, this is something that we want to examine, but there are many other factors that we're going to have to deal with.
But it still requires the legislature's approval.
Correct.
That's correct.
And Director Carr, Jamil Moons, Administrative Services Division Manager, I just wanted to also clarify, as we talk about these different revenue strategies, that the different strategies can fund specific programs. So you are absolutely right. In the stationary sources, we are going to go do a study, make sure that all of our permitting fees are full cost recovery, saying that those fees that we generate from those sources and entities cannot be used as an example to pay for these incentive projects that are coming to the region. So there are different strategies that generate different types of revenues to pay for programs. So that will help ensure that our stationary services programs, all those programs are fully paid for and don't need other sources. In the instance of the incentive programs that come to the region, we need a different type of revenue, which would be additional DMV dollars or the incentive admin money, which is right below the line right there.
Understand. The next one is a incentive admin for mobile, and that has a potential of $2 million. How does that work?
So these are basically the dollars that we get from the Air Resources Board for incentives. So this is essentially the money that populates and funds the map, the projects on the map. And basically, the state dollars come with a 6.25% for admin. And clearly, we all recognize that 6.25% admin is not fully meeting the overhead requirement. So our strategy here is, again, working through the straight process and the other districts to see if we can bump that up to, at a minimum, 12.5%, which is what some of the smaller air districts are currently getting.
And to clarify, the requirement there is, it's in state law. It calls out the size of the air districts, which stipulates whether you get the 6.25% or the 12.5%. It's at a regional population of 1 million, so that would require legislature involvement to make those changes. And or at the CARB level, I don't think they can independently make that decision. I don't think it's discretionary since it is in state law, but we will be working both those fronts.
Would those have to go back to the voters to approve? Is that a new tax?
Not the voters, but as Ms. Moons pointed out,
legislature.
yeah, right, changes to statute.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. I understand there are going to be some complications. Not all money looks the same, and some can be used for some programs and others for other programs. I really appreciate that. I would look at the other sources that we can tap into, especially cost recovery. That's another $1 million. I know we have a $6 million gap. Here's $1 million we can fill with full cost recovery right away. And then look at these other programs, work with the other districts and the legislature, in trying to increase the surcharges for DMV and the mobile admin costs. I would go there first and see how much we can get done in that arena, and then see what that does for us, and see what the prospects of getting any of that, making any of that happen. Going to the jurisdictions is going to be tough, but and some jurisdictions are really tapped, as you've heard, for the per capita. So I would look at the other things before we address per capita.
Thank you, Board Member Carr. Unfortunately, I need to step out for another meeting, and I'm going to hand over the gavel to Vice Chair Frost here. I wanted to make a couple points here. I think Board Member Carr mentioned it here that we have a number of options. I think what Dr. Ayala has brought to us is the thing that is under our control. I do want to, bring up a kind of a standing position that we've had on the board when it comes to some of the fees. The more we put fees on the businesses that can impact our county, that's also a challenge. So everything is a balance, right? If we put too many fees on our particularly our stationary sources, which are the largest employers in our county, then at some point now we start tipping the needle about our overall regional economic strength. So I think we have to balance it all out. And I for one would want to see if we can go back. I think the point about going to the public works directors and the city managers to find out what are the consequences. Wouldn't want to be penny wise for a pound foolish on this. And again, there is an urgency, but at the same time, it's not an immediate cut that we have to do. So we don't meet till January. I'd rather get this right than not. But more importantly, we just can't have a non-functioning air district. I mean, there are, I think, Board Member Carr, there's only so many oats you can, take out of the.
It's just full cost recovery. You're not adding fees.
Yep. Exactly.
You're recovering the cost of the service.
Yes. Yeah. No. Yeah. So to that point, I think I want to make sure we come back and look at what is another balanced approach. Say if we did full cost recover fees, and also I know our legislative team is looking at and also approaching the legislature to continue to advocate for the administrative cost recovery as well for the programs. And also I think we should have a further discussion about, does this air district want to sponsor a legislation for a DMV surcharge? So all of this, I do want to thank Dr. Ayala for bringing this issue back to us, because I don't think that taking no action is we can't kick the can down the road. We have to figure out what's the long-term solution to making sure that we have a functioning air district, because there is more at stake. So with that, I'm going to pass over the gavel to Board Member Frost, Vice Chair Frost.
Thank you, Director Guerra. And our next speaker is Director Natoli.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. We've talked a lot about this at the last meeting, and certainly, again, a number of the comments that have been made by colleagues here I would echo. But I want to, again, thank certainly Alberto and the staff for, I think, continuing to keep this in front of us as it relates to some of the budget challenges. But I don't think there's any dispute about the value that not only this district and its work in all the respective areas, both in the regulatory oversight, but certainly in helping to find compliance for a very important aspect of daily life, obviously our air quality. And I don't think there's any question that this relates directly to public health and the quality of life. I wanted, though, just to, I think, frame this a bit, talk, without specifically, addressing some of the other comments that were made here, that the discretionary dollars that were referenced, certainly by Director Cerna, but by others, we know about mandates in county land and about having programs that you're required to do that you don't get any funding for. We were told to do them, and we do them to the best of our ability. And certainly having the experience of gone through a number of budget cycles, certainly at the county level, but obviously with the various boards that that I'm given the privilege of serving on. We take that responsibility seriously, and again, it's serious here, this shortfall. But what we're looking at, I believe, and I think it's becoming ever clearer, and Director Cerna referenced it in these chambers the other day. We spoke for many hours, heard public testimony, heard from people that are in leadership positions, in this case in law enforcement, but talked about conditions in our jails, corrections, which counties now have inherited as a part of change and legislative changes that have come down the pike, some of it by initiative as well. And again, we're looking very clearly at the potential for turning back $80 million because the ongoing costs that go with that, the responsibility we would bear for a period of 30 years in somewhere close to $6 million in additional staffing responsibilities. And that, again, those dollars come out of discretionary dollars, the same funds we're talking about with per capita. And yeah, that may pale in comparison to what was being charted here this morning, but there's quality of life issues. Again, we have zero capital dollars in our parks budget. We struggle to find money for libraries. We struggle to cover public health responsibilities in other realms for children, for families, for seniors. And it's not to sound like we're poor, because we're not. Again, we're very blessed in this region to have resources by which to have these discussions. And I guess the point I want to make about that is that this isn't, to another point was made, this isn't any less important than things I mentioned and many others we could talk about. But I think it reflects the pressures that certainly members of the Board of Supervisors, but our respective council members as well, maybe with a little more focus to it. And I appreciate comments by, Council Member Terry. Again, I represent the city of Rancho Cordova. Those struggles to provide for that infrastructure, to meet the obligations that we have to state and federal regulators so that we can draw those dollars down. But I think that when we look at the per capita, and I guess the concern I would express here is that I think the revised proposal obviously looks at a different starting point. But my experience has been, too, is that there's some creep that occurs over time, either intentionally or unintentionally, because if that becomes a source to go to, and you go to a county that has a several $7 billion budget, a lot of that is siloed, but nonetheless, and you say, well, it's only $1 million, or it's only $500,000, it'll only be $1 million next year, and it may ramp up to $3 million. You ought to be able to afford that because you get X amount of benefit. I think those are certainly legitimate arguments, but I think my concern is that I know that we're coming into a time when we're going to struggle with some of the things I mentioned and others have mentioned as well, and they affect all the folks, whether you live in a city or in a county within the realms of the Air District. And I think that as we're looking at this, that discussions on Measure A right now, and again, there's a lot of scrambling for that, because again, if that goes on the ballot and is ultimately supported by the voters in whatever context it's framed, there's a lot of give and take in that, but that is a spread. It would be an additional source of funding. It is a spread that takes into account everybody in the county, and I would suggest that might be, at least until those discussions are known, which they will be known here obviously in the next few months, as to whether that goes on the ballot, but secondly, what that looks like. And I would say that this shortfall should be framed in that context, and I trust, Alberta, that you and your staff in those discussions and whoever else represents us in that regard is talking about certainly the Air District share. But I think it's important to connect that dot to what we talked about here: transportation infrastructure, mobile sources that contribute to a lot of the air quality challenges that we have, and obviously our compliance, and the fact that those vehicles that travel certainly through, but each day in this community, are contributory sources to some of the things that we need to do, and that transportation infrastructure provides the routes by which they travel. And if we're trying to clean up our fleets, whether they're our large heavy-duty fleets or light-duty fleets, there's a lot of benefit that could accrue. So I guess I would just say that I for one, appreciate the challenge that staff has brought into us. I'm not insensitive to the fact that per capita is something that's available to this district, and yes, we can impose that upon ourselves. But I look at it through two lenses. One is a member of this board, but certainly as the responsibility of how I get here anyway, by election to the Board of Supervisors. And I know that some of the trade-offs, because it may not sound like a lot even at the 50-cent level, $300,000 though, I know what that can buy and what we're going to be challenged with, because those nickels and dimes, they do add up. Would we build it into our budget if we did it? Yes, we would. And, you know, and something else gives, though. And so there's a lot at risk. And I guess I would suggest that you could go back to the public works directors. I don't know that, you know, that's going to tell you a whole lot more than we already know at this juncture. And I would suggest, for purposes today, that we wait for at least the outcome of what Measure A is going to look like, and if in fact it's going to go on the ballot. And then I think that would give us some sense about where we're at. And that at least for the present time, recognizing the criticality of some of this as it relates to the district, that we, look at some of the other options. And I would just say lastly that the DMV surcharge, I know over the years that I've sat on this board that has gone from 2 to 4 to 6, and I guess it's now proposed to go back down to 4 without some legislative adjustment. That's one source that goes to vehicle owners. It doesn't get everybody in the pool, and that's why I think there may be a different spread here that would provide for that. But that should be something we ought to take a look at, because that, again, that gets to a more statewide effort and certain people in the district. But I'm not interested in necessarily sending back folks to do another round with the public works directors unless that's, will of this board. I just think that at this point in time, I prefer to wait and see what the Measure A looks like. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Natoli. Director Peters.
Thank you. I think I'm probably going to say pretty much the same thing as the other members of the Board of Supervisors. I think only Don and I were here during the recession, and we...
well, Phil got part of it.
I was back there.
Yeah. and we turned back hundreds of millions of dollars in state program funding because the cost of matching in some amount was too expensive. We laid off 3,000 employees. So that, and you'd think that times are better now, but so many of the state programs come with mandated matching fund in some amount that we can't afford it. As Don said, we debated for 5 or 6 hours on this week about turning back all or a portion of $80 million because we can't afford the operating costs of staff for those investmts. So I prefer that you, and I want to say also, I don't have enough detail on the potential cuts or, for instance, you say travel has been cut by 80%. Well, you're going to have to remind all of us how much is that 20%. When you talk about programs that have mandated funding, I'd like to know exactly what that is, the ones that you're doing now, and then maybe this board will have to look at those and decide which ones we're not going to do, instead of just generalized comments on, well, we need these things. Well, at the county, we need all of those things too, but we're having to wield a tough penciling of those programs. So also, I haven't heard that much about going back to the CARB board and explaining to them what these mandates are doing, and that it's putting too much pressure on local government budgets. So I'd like to hear about all of those things in addition to the other comments that have been made here.
Thank you. Director Gaylord.
Thank you. I certainly just wanted to echo Supervisor Frost and Tolley and Peters' comments. I mean, essentially, that's pretty much my take on this as well. The car comment is really important. I think some of these things come down and we just automatically acclimate to them and adapt to them instead of maybe challenging some of them and going back to understanding, hey, this is too much of an ask for this. We need to do it this way. Supervisor Frost hit it right on the head. I spent the better part, since we discussed this, on how to, maximize that trade-off and that value. And Director Terry explained, going back to your public works director or your city staff, and that's exactly what we did. And the big need we need is something small like refuse trucks, and trying to change that from the standard operating procedure of diesel into new technology, but that's not there yet. What I'm finding is that folks talk about, hey, we can do this, we're going to do that, but when you actually want to buy it, you can't buy it. It's not there. So I think it's a little premature to say this is the tangible ROI or the trade-off locally for constituents. And then, to Director or Supervisor Natoli's comments on real-world quality of life issues that we're dealing with, we're already looking at a rate increase in the city of Folsom right now. We're in the Prop 218 process, and that's, the pushback from that is tremendous already. And that's just to shore up what we already are experiencing. So I think those are just some of my comments. I think, I thank your staff, and I value the mission, and I think it's an important mission. The other part is that I hear feedback on is why is it now that we're hearing about kind of the benefits and value of the partnership with the Air Board? And I don't think I don't think it's never been there. I just think it's not been kind of marketed to a point where now it's kind of being pushed as a value because there's an ask. And so that's kind of the feedback I get from constituents. So, but I appreciate it, and I appreciate everyone's comments, but I think it's just not there yet.
I believe Director Daniels was next.
Thank you. One of the slides mentioned $4 million in cuts. Does that mean that the budget that we received, or the dollars that we received, were $4 million less, or does that mean something else? Because sometimes the word cuts in budgets means something else.
When we compare the budget to actuals, we are almost $4 million, 3.9, 3.8 million under.
Yeah, to clarify, Director Daniels, this is on the expenditure side. So it primarily comes from labor, about $1.8 million in labor and benefits on the expenditure side, as well as some of our contracts, and a deferral of about $1 million into this year on capital. So that's what comprises that. So on the revenue side, we were stable of what we projected we received. It wasn't that we reduced services or something that we got less revenue. It was a matter of where we had budgeted expenditures that we realized some savings in this past year.
Okay, so the answer I think I heard was that we're still getting the same amount of money, basically, as an air district, but we have increased cost and things like that. Is that what I heard in that answer?
So let me see if I can restate that, because I'm not clear, but let me restate that. So we had a budgeted, approved budget this past year. This is what we were talking about. The savings were not in the current year, but in the past year, there was a board-approved budget, both for the revenue that we expected to receive and the expenditures that we had anticipated expending. In that, there was a structural deficit, and it was identified of a use, I'm not sure of the number off the top of my head, but about $2.5 million use of fund balance. So we knew that going into the year, we would be spending more than we would be actually bringing in that particular fiscal year. At the end of the year, we're more like a break-even savings. We did not go into that fund balance. We mitigated, we deferred those expenditures and or just did not incur them, and as a result of holding positions vacant, as an example. So what we did is, from where the approved budget was, what we had planned to spend, we did not spend about $4 million, roughly just under that, in what we had anticipated spending for the year.
Okay.
I hope that clarifies. I apologize.
Thank you very much. So I think our discussion kind of also underscores the frustration with government in general. You know, we're saying that there's 100 million or more over here that we could find our path to, but we have this $4 million problem down here, or $6 million problem down here. And it's almost shameful that the system, the structure of everything is not such that we can't go to who has the money, which is the state really right now. I mean, they're gleefully telling us how much money they have in their surplus, and not say, well, okay, well, that's great, but we're down here trying to do this really important thing that you're mandating us to do most of the time. And so we need a little bit more of that, those oats. We need some more oats. And so it just really, it's so frustrating to hear all these numbers thrown around and know that the state is sending, according to them, on a big pot of gold. And I think that any effort to come back to any of us smaller, I'll call us the smaller cities in the county, and the county obviously, it is not going to happen. And I mean, you can, I guess, spend that time going to those public works people, but those aren't going to be the decision makers. And I believe our decision makers have been pretty clear that it's not going to come out of our budgets. And Citrus Heights specifically is already in a negative budget, and so it's not going to come from us, definitely. And so where does it come from? And I think that's what you were asking for, and some things were brought up. And I don't know how much of an effort it would take, or whether the value would be there in going back to all of these things that we do now that do bring in revenue that do not have those inflation factors in them, and working on those. And that's not going to close that gap totally, but it's going to chip away at it. And I don't understand why those things were even created without the aspect of, and the next year this will increase this much because of inflation. That's just sloppy, I think. And then, again, the final thing, there's 35, I guess, air boards, and I think a lot of the folks that, like us, that sit on these air boards, some of us, or some of the folks that have been here before, have gone on to the state level, so there is those folks in the state legislature that understand our pain, and I think we need to be reaching out to them in an effort to find that path to the pot of gold, to the bag of votes, and saying, you were here, you understand the pain, but you're still part of the problem that's imposing these things on us. We need your help now. So those are my words. Golden oats.
Thank you, Director Daniels. Also, we're losing one of our great folks at SACOG to the state. There are people at the state who understand our pain. That's a thought for our legislative people to track them down. Director Lee.
First thing I want to thank Dr. Ayala. You've, given your all in making sure that the various jurisdiction has been updated and brought up to speed. And I really appreciate that, taking time out of your busy schedule. And, I want to certainly acknowledge that your efforts was under the direction of this board. And it's always good to think outside the box, to explore the different options. That's really healthy, to have a healthy exchange. But I think it's pretty clear from the board that we have to explore other options. Just discussing with the city staff, if we were at $1.50 per capita, that's about 3% of our general budget. That's 2 police officers full-time, 1 community service officer. And when push comes to shove, and there's a balancing act between being a fiduciary, a steward of this board and also of the city, I have to really prioritize and really look at what really impacts the community and how activists are going to come out and say, you're spending how much and where. I appreciate your efforts, but certainly from the fastest growing city in this region, I think it's important to highlight that. Nonetheless, I do appreciate your effort. I think it's genuine, and as the CEO of this district, you're working very diligently, so I appreciate that. But I want to highlight the fact that we really should explore other options. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lee. Director Cerna.
Thank you. Ironically enough, I'm going to have to part to get to the CARB hearing that's going on right now. I just wanted to leave you with the last thought before I do depart. First of all, I agree with Director Natoli and his suggestion that perhaps we look at the outcome of Measure A before we take further action on this. But what I wanted to stress was, should you feel compelled to continue your discussions with city managers and the county CEO, public works directors, I guess, for that matter, take, and I would include in that our CFO, take advantage of that opportunity and perhaps change the question a bit. Instead of asking, well, what's the pain threshold for a fee, which I think, you've already had some pretty clear feedback from those executives about the stress involved with trying to achieve that. Change the question and maybe use their expertise to ask the question, well, what are some other opportunities that come through the county, come through the city of Elk Grove, other members of this body, to achieve what you're trying to do? Because again, I can't stress enough, it's not that any one of us up here disagrees with what you're attempting to do, what the legislation's intent is, and that should not be confused with the pretty visceral reaction you're getting about just the narrow context of the discussion thus far, which is, here's a fee, go figure it out, County of Sacramento and cities. So I think if you change the discussion a bit with some of those executives about what are some other avenues to pursue with their assistance that aren't going to come with a net county additional cost or having to consider reductions in other programs and budgets, I think that is probably where you're going to find probably a more productive outcome, quite frankly. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cerna. Director Natoli.
Yeah, just briefly, just as we're making some suggestions here, it seemed to me, and again, it might help bring some focus with your peers in this Measure A discussion, Alberto, that the importance of SIP compliance, of the SACOG conformity, that those items, you know, in a broader measure where we're looking at trying to parse out funding for public transportation, for public infrastructure and so forth, those are key pieces, and that, you know, having sufficient funding going forward over a period of time is a key component of that. Obviously, it comes out of that pot and is part of the, you know, discussion around money and who gets what and apportionments and so forth. But I think it would probably be very difficult to argue that it's not essential, particularly for those areas where, you know, you've got to have those things, those boxes have to be checked, or otherwise you can just figure you're not even in the running. And secondly, one of the things that's occurred to me, and again, you know, certainly we're having this discussion at the STA board and, you know, with our respective jurisdictions, is that the ability to, one, meet that compliance, but secondly, to make sure we have the sufficient match. And again, talking about some of the issues that, you know, relate to general governance, certainly at the county level. And so I guess I certainly would be very open to that, because again, another hat that most of us up here wears is going to be at the STA level. And I think that, you know, how the AQMD is not only its role in our region, but what that means to the ability on the Measure A, but also if there is a Measure A, that what that means then to the ability to long-term to stay in conformity, to, you know, improve our air quality, but also then to fund either some of the improvements to fleets, which are going to travel those roads, to that we look at neighborhoods that may be underserved. I mean, I see some very clear linkage there. Again, it's still kind of a food fight because everybody wants to make sure they get enough, you know, for their jurisdiction. But I do think that this discussion, and to the compliments you received here today, and I would add to that, I think this has brought clear focus to the needs within the Air District, but also the role that, you know, you and your staff play, and what that means to those of us who, you know, have that role as it relates to public infrastructure. That's a, you know, that's a true asset, but this is essential to maintaining that asset, but also being able to improve that asset. So I would hope that maybe some takeaway from this would be, again, to my comments earlier about the the outcome of Measure A, but I think, excuse me, as that's crafted, this could be a very key point. So, and I don't know whether it already has been or not, but when you're sitting with public works directors or finance officials, certainly electeds that are having that discussion at that level, I think that, you know, don't let that point get lost. Not that you would, but I think it needs to be highlighted, because it seems to me that that could be a very key piece of seeing what the AQMD would be apportioned over a multi-year period of time. I think would go in great part to potentially closing some of this gap.
Maybe just to react to that specific point, Director Natoli, the point is very well taken, and rest assured, we have been at the table. We're fortunate that we have been invited to the table. We benefit from the fact that one of the principles in Measure A is still air quality. Again, you can rest assured that we have been making the case in terms of what it means to have a well-sourced functioning air district, not only for the goals of Measure A, but as you pointed out, the connections to SACOG and some of the other funding. So we will continue to do that. And like I said, I mean, that was the plan. That's going to be the focus for us next year for obvious reasons. We've already gone before STA and presented, as the other jurisdictions did, our accomplishments with the current measure and the unmet need that we hope the new measure will help us with.
You know, one other comment I would just make briefly is that beyond, you know, the air quality piece of it, though, there's this nuts and bolts piece that fits in that, you know, machinery that would then delivers projects. It sees to it that we draw down on those funds, and that AQMD is a key part of that. It's not just about doing, you know, stuff over here that, you know, helps us get cleaner air and may have some connectivity that becomes part of that an essential piece of that. So again,
We will definitely do that. And this one is a bit of a back at you because we also want to get your help to make sure that you understand, that you explain that connection to those folks. Because again, we've spent time with you kind of walking through that process and that help us. We will make that point, but we also want you to help us.
Thanks.
Yeah, I just want to add that at STA we're doing some outreach and public meetings and polling, and hopefully there are some pertinent questions within that surveying structure that will give us information relating, or just give us feedback on air quality's part in that Measure A. So I don't see anyone else signed up to speak, and most of the board is gone. So, but what I did hear, and I really appreciate that you brought it back. I know the budget committee basically said obviously the conversation needs to continue. We weren't ready to really vote on something, but get some direction. And I heard a lot of direction from a lot of directors today. Director Harris talked about looking to see what the jurisdictions can do. I know there were some directors who felt, let's wait till Measure A. But reaching out to the jurisdictions and to CARB and to the state, to the jurisdictions with more information that it can quantify the cost and the benefits. I think Supervisor Peters was asking for more detail on the funding and the structures there. And also reaching back to CARB to see if there's any way we can get more creative, or if there's any thing they can think of that might help us with this problem. And so, and looking to all the other sources. I know you're already doing that, but I think that kind of gives us our marching orders moving forward, that there's more work to do at all fronts. And I want to thank all of you for all your hard work, and also for your the way you've managed the budget, and the way you've tried so hard to look for efficiencies and protect us so that we can react no matter what happens. So we all appreciate that. I do not have anyone signed up for public comment, and I do not know if any of the board members have any comments or ideas. And do you have any further announcements, Dr. Ayala?
Maybe just a clarifying point, and I want to make sure that those of you that are still here are comfortable. I think what I'm hearing is what I would like to propose, given that this is the last meeting of this year. We'll come back next year. I'd like to propose that we fold any and all additional discussions on this to just our budget process. Early next year, you're going to start to hear about the next fiscal year budget. I think it's pertaining and appropriate for us to bring you an update in terms of some of the direction that you gave us today, as opposed to trying to bring back some separate report on we want to continue the interaction with the jurisdictions. We'll go back and put our thinking hats on and see what we make out of this. And next year, if you're okay with that, and that's the reason I'm asking for clarification, is that we just fold the update into our budget process, which is going to be starting early next year.
I think that makes sense. Does everyone else? It's perfect. All right. Well, if there are no more comments, then there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.
Take a picture of Sue all by herself.
I know.